Imagine a world where everything is still and the only sound you hear is your own heartbeat echoing in your ears. This is not a world far off in a distant galaxy, but the reality of working alone in a usually vibrant office building late into the night. The once bustling hallways are now desolate. The incessant ringing of phones replaced by an unsettling silence. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead is the only company you have, a stark reminder of your solitude. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock on the wall beats in rhythm with your heart, a symphony of solitude that plays only for you. It's in these moments that your senses heighten, and the benign becomes the bizarre. The shadows seem to dance, the silence screams, and the ordinary office building transforms into an eerie maze. But little did I know I was not as alone as I thought. As the clock struck midnight, something felt off. A chill ran down my spine. That's when the oddities began to creep in, slowly gnawing at the edges of my sanity. The once comforting quiet of the office started to feel oppressive, as if the very silence had turned against me. In the heart of this quietude, the ordinary became extraordinary. The hum of the air conditioner, which I'd always taken for granted, now echoed ominously through the empty hallways. The once soothing whir of the computer started to sound like a distant growl. And then, there were the lights. The lights. They'd always been reliable, a beacon of sanity in the deepening night. But now, they flickered. Once, twice, and then with a rhythm that was almost deliberate. It was as if some unseen entity was playing with them, toying with my already frayed nerves. And then came the sounds that had no business being there. A soft tapping, like someone or something was drumming their fingers on a hard surface. A distant rustle, as if a piece of paper was being crumpled up, then smoothed out again. The faintest creak of a door opening, when I absolutely knew, I was the only one in the building. The rational part of my mind tried to dismiss these sounds, to attribute them to the building settling, or maybe even a mouse. But deep down, I knew. I knew that these were not the sounds of an old building or a rodent. These were the sounds of an unseen presence. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. The chill that had started as a shiver down my spine now enveloped me, wrapping me in a cold embrace. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was just the late hour playing tricks on my mind. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to my imagination. But the night was just beginning. Then, out of nowhere, a cold gust of wind blew past me. The office was supposed to be sealed. It was an eerie sensation, as if a ghostly hand had reached out and grazed my skin. How could this be? I was indoors, alone in a modern office building. The chill was so intense that it made my skin prickle and my breath turn to fog. Suddenly, a pin on my desk began to roll, unaided, towards the edge. It teetered for a moment, then fell, clattering onto the floor. It was as if an unseen hand had nudged it. I stared at the pin, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a gust of wind. This was something else. Next, the lights began to flicker, plunging the room into darkness and then back into light, over and over. It was like a scene from a horror movie, only this was real and I was the unwilling participant. I could feel a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The temperature in the room dropped even further and my breath became visible in the air. It felt like I was being watched, like 1,000 invisible eyes were fixed on me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The air was charged with an electric tension and I knew I wasn't alone. The night was no longer silent. The stillness was broken by the sound of a soft whisper, a voice that wasn't mine. It was a low murmur, just barely audible, but undeniably there. It was speaking, saying something I couldn't quite make out, but its tone was menacing. The fear was now palpable, a living entity in the room. It was as if the dark corners of the office had come alive, filled with an unseen presence that was closing in on me. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I could almost feel the weight of its gaze. I was no longer alone, and whatever was with me, it wasn't friendly. With every tick of the clock, the presence grew stronger, and then I found it, the secret buried long ago. In the depths of the office archives, buried under a mound of dusty files and forgotten records, I unearthed a newspaper clipping. It was yellowed with age, the text barely legible. As I squinted to make out the words, my heart pounded in my chest, my palms slick with a cold sweat. The headline read, "Tragic accident claims life at local office building." The date stamped on top was decades old, a forgotten piece of history until now. The story unfolded in front of my eyes, a dark tale hidden in the shadows of the past. The building had once been a bustling hub, home to ambitious dreams and tireless workers. But one fateful night, a worker, alone and overworked, met an untimely end in a horrific accident. The details were hazy, obscured by the passage of time, but the chilling truth was clear. I was standing in a haunted monument to a life cut short, a grim reminder of the dangers of solitude and overwork. The chill that had been my constant companion since I started working late nights. The unseen presence, the whispers in the silence, it all fell into place. I wasn't alone. I was sharing these long, dark hours with a spirit trapped in an endless cycle of work, a phantom colleague who never clocked out. The horror of it was not just in the tragic end of a life, but in the revelation that his suffering had been forgotten, buried under the machinations of a company that moved on too quickly. His spirit, it seemed, was bound to the building, forever repeating his last moments, stuck in a time and place that the world had left behind. The entity wasn't malevolent. It was lost, forgotten, and desperate to be remembered. The eerie happenings weren't threats, but pleas for acknowledgement, a cry for help from beyond the veil. I was standing in the very spot where it happened, and the entity wanted me to know. I had to get out. The entity was closing in, and time was running out. The tension was at a peak, the air thick with an unspeakable dread. The once familiar office building had turned into a labyrinth of shadows and fear. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, each beat echoing the seconds I had left. I had to escape, to break free from this unseen terror that stalked me relentlessly. Every creak of the old building, every flicker of the failing lights, they were all a stark reminder that I was not alone. My breath hitched in my throat as I heard it again, the low, guttural growl that had been my only company in the haunting silence. It was nearer now, its presence palpable, an icy chill that sank into my very bones. I pushed past the paralyzing fear, igniting the primal instinct of survival. I stumbled through the labyrinth, my only beacon of hope being the faint glow of the exit sign. It was a race against an unseen opponent, a macabre game of cat and mouse. Sweat trickled down my face, my heart pounded in rhythm with my desperate footsteps. The office seemed to stretch on forever, each turn leading to another endless corridor. The entity was relentless, its pursuit never faltering. The growls grew louder, the temperature dropped further, a clear sign that it was closing in. I could almost feel its icy breath on the back of my neck. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it, the main entrance, bathed in the comforting glow of the streetlights. With a final surge of adrenaline, I sprinted towards it, the entity's growls echoing in the eerie silence. I could feel its cold touch grazing my back as I burst through the office doors, the chilling night air sweeping over me. As I burst through the office doors into the quiet street, I knew I would never forget this night. I never stepped foot in that office again, but the memory of that night still haunts me. An icy shiver snakes down my spine each time I recall the chilling silence and the unseen presence. The encounter was unnerving, the unveiled truth even more so. It's an experience I wouldn't wish upon anyone. A stark reminder that there are forces beyond our understanding, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment. I often wonder, what would have happened had I not made that unforgettable escape? Would I be here sharing this tale of horror? I'm not so sure. I was alone at work that night, or so I thought. But, as it turns out, we're never truly alone. There's always something or someone watching, waiting. So the next time you find yourself alone in the quiet, listen closely. You might not be as alone as you think. Remember, when you're alone in the quiet, listen closely. You might not be as alone as you think. Don't forget to subscribe and share if you enjoyed this chilling tale.